I am with Jay Taylor, and unfortunately, no direct relationship. Would love it if there were.
Me too.
Jay has been a transactional attorney in his career. He has worked with literally thousands of entrepreneurs, and most recently is a founder of EFL 360, which is a group designed to support entrepreneurs in creating their businesses. And I'm talking with Jay today because he has an amazing experience with entrepreneurs and amazing experience with business plans. Tell us your history with creating business plans.
Okay, sure. Happy to. I can think of the first business plan problem that I did, and it just came to mind right now. In law school, in a capitalization class, we were given a final, and we were given 24 hours to do the final. Could use any resources we want, anything we could do. It was 2 questions, and one was, what's the cap table look like, and one is prepare a business plan. And I remember I took 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 59 seconds, and I only answered one question, and it was just do the business plan. So that just came to mind.
I hope that was heavily weighted in the grading.
Oh yeah, I mean, so 2 questions on the test, I didn't even answer one of them. But business plans and planning and organization kind of always been a part of what I've enjoyed doing, and found a niche in that space. My business plan writing was really provided to me by some mentor attorneys who did SEC compliance work and raised money for public companies. And in most of the SEC disclosures, you have to share a fairly detailed business plan of the business and business operations. And the thing about that is that there's not enough disclosure, or if it looks like it's weighted one way, or if it looks like too much hyperbole, the SEC would come in and they would have comments and ask for things to be clarified or done. So had some really good subject matter editors there, and that's kind of where the background came from. And then over the years, just really specialized in written business plans because I found them so important, because people would go about doing things aimlessly. And then for a pretty significant period of time, I prepared written business plans for debt-based funding. And that was kind of the specialty that lasted for a while. And during the course of that time period, Kevin, I either wrote or edited or collaborated on literally thousands and thousands and thousands of business plans over a 10 or 15 year period.
So talking about a business plan here is not your first rodeo.
No, not yeah. It isn't, and it's in doing that volume of business plans kind of that my expertise or my ideas was developed.
So you shared a couple of reasons why people would write a business plan. SEC compliance, which I don't think any of the students in this class are going to be dealing with, at least not for a little bit. Debt-based funding is another. Mm-hmm. Why else would a business owner, would an entrepreneur write a business plan?
And I really think that all business owners or all entrepreneurs need to write a business plan. And I think 2 reasons. Number one, they need to formulate a plan, period. What's kind of my takeaway after several decades of being a transactional attorney and being in this space is one can't have a written or a successful or an effective written business plan until one first has an effective plan for business. And so it is truly just the planning. It is the mental exercises, it is the research, it is the work that one goes through to determine, is this going to work? How's it going to work? What is it going to look like? And then the process of writing something, even if it's not shared with anybody, reinforces in our brains, what we're doing. And it's just, I don't think there's any comparable experience to writing something down.
You shared with me, I believe it was Douglas MacArthur had said, plans are nothing, planning is everything. It sounds like that's what you're saying about a business plan.
Absolutely, absolutely. The plan can change, the plan will change, and inevitably people think that it's one size fits all. There's this concept of I write a business plan and magically there's going to be VCs pop up out of nowhere and it's going to work for other type of funding and such like that. But business plans get to be specific for what they are. A business plan for debt-based funding is very different than a business plan for SEC compliance, which is very different than a business plan that would be looked at by a venture capitalist, which is very different than an internal business plan for operations. How do we do this? But it is all about the planning. It's all about getting into the details and really taking a look at it and kind of being forced, if you will, being compelled to share, being compelled to take what's up here or what's in the heart, what's been in that dream, and share it in a way that's cogent, that's accurate, that's compelling.
So I had down a little bit later, but we just touched on it now. When and how do you know that your business plan needs to be changed?
I think without measuring, without monitoring, one wouldn't know. I think it's important to take a look at one, particularly if one's an entrepreneur and just beginning in that first year, first 2 years of going forward, and somebody sets forth a business plan, and one of the components of the business plan are either benchmarks or milestones. That is, clearly a time where if it says within 3 months, within 6 months, within 1 year, or upon reaching this volume of sales, we're going to hire or something like that. So by identifying either benchmarks or thresholds that are crossed in the written business plan, that actually serves as a very compelling and very clear reminder of when to look at it. I think the other side of that has to be looked at is people who stick too closely to a plan and don't pivot or don't change, don't shift. But that written business plan is a living document, and it needs to be seen as a living document and a map of where we're going. But oftentimes when we look at a map and we see the territory that's far off, as we get closer to that territory, some of the features and the contours change, right? And some of the trails have been washed out. Let me take another one.
All right. So what are some of the key elements to a business plan? What do people need to put in those? High level.
Yeah, no. The high level, and let's just talk about something first. For a business plan to be effective, I think it needs to be accurate, it needs to be complete, and it needs to be compelling. So those are kind of just 3 things I would suggest on that high level. If a business plan is inaccurate or full of vanity metrics or full of assumptions that aren't substantiated or supported, it really isn't worth much, right? I mean, even going through the exercise. So it needs to be accurate. It needs to be compelling from the standpoint of driving to action, and it needs to be complete. So even if we have 3 or 4 super strong sections in a business plan, but we leave out an entire section, it's incomplete. It doesn't do that. Otherwise, I think one of the most important parts of the business plan is the overview, because it typically takes, if you have a 10-page business plan or a 100-page business plan, and you have a 1-page overview or 3-page overview, it again forces the writer, the drafter, the preparer of the plan, the entrepreneur to really succinctly set forth the vision of what it looks like. And so I think the overview is a critical part of the business plan.
Can I just interject?
Yes, please. Yeah.
The overview that Jay's talking about is the same as the executive summary in the plan that we're putting together in a class here.
Exactly, the executive summary. And because when one becomes familiar with the executive summary, right, or that overview, then one can more clearly share the vision. One can more, communicate more quickly. So I think that's a really critical section. I think another aspect of business plans that make them full and complete and accurate is specificity. If we just say, we've got a great idea for manufacturing. We know a great company to manufacture. We have a super idea of who our customer would be. None of those things really work. It is an identification of who the customer is. It's an identification of what manufacturing plant. It's an identification that way. So specificity is really huge. Excuse me, and Kevin, a lot of people forget the who's. They kind of talk about we're going to sell widgets or we're going to sell this particular product, but really drilling down into the who we're going to reach, who's going to buy it. And in that, I think another really important thing is with respect to target market, is we have many products and services that have two different target markets that are equally as valuable. One is the target market who's going to use the product or service, and another is the target market who's actually going to purchase it. So if your business model or your business plan, involves things for children, who typically aren't going to be the buyers. Let's say it's braces or a dental appliance or something. It's a parent.
My kids love buying those.
Yeah, right. It's right on their allowance list. And we say, well, the target market is, children 11 to 18 who need braces. Well, that is the target market for who the product will be applied with, but it's not really the target market that you go and pitch. And the other thing that if I just share one more thing that I think is really important is an accurate treatment of the revenue model. I think we need to look at a business plan is this wide and sweeping plan that has subcomponents to it, like the executive summary, the conclusion, the marketing plan, but really setting forth the revenue model. How does this business actually make money is critical.
You say that like you've seen it skipped at times.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it sounds like, there are things that people forget to put in. It sounds like how are we actually going to make money is one of those that you really would want to address. What else have you seen skipped or missed?
I think a really important point, and I want to give a little background to it. So many times people who are selling something to entrepreneurs or selling something to business owners or fledgling companies stick by the statistic of over 90% of the businesses fail in the first year, over half of the businesses aren't, in 5 years, or over half, a lot of things. A lot of those statistics are thrown around to sell a product or a service and don't accurately reflect why businesses fail, right? Or why businesses don't go through. And I think a lot of that reason is because they don't have a complete plan. One of the areas that is omitted most, and so many business plans seek funding in some way, seek revenue in some way outside of the product or service, be it a loan, be it credit card advancements or whatever it is, but it's the use of proceeds from funding. Being very, very specific. That's the area that is seen most omitted. So typically what you will see is somebody do a business plan and it says, we need to create this much capital, we need to raise this much capital, we need to do a crowdfunding, we need to borrow to spend it on labor, products, marketing. Those are typically things with labor and marketing. It's not good enough. That business has a higher probability of failing, has a tremendous probability of not being funded and therefore failing, simply because it hasn't identified what labor do you need? What are the costs of that labor? What are the costs of the marketing? How does that marketing reach? So that's probably the biggest area I've seen overall, is how the funding will be used. If there's not funding being sought, there's going to be bootstrapping or one's going to go forward in terms of that revenue model, how that revenue is going to be allocated and spent, looking at fixed costs, looking at salaries and things like that. A lot of people don't include all the real costs it takes to run a business.
Interesting thing to skip.
It is.
We're going to make money and we're going to somehow magically be rich at that point, and no thought of it's going to take something to build this.
Truly, or just no specificity, just like, I'll take a salary and there'll be a car payment or something, but not the level of detail that needs to be there in order to really see if the revenue model will work.
All right. How early in its development should an entrepreneur look at a business plan for their business? Should this be before they even come up with a product? Should this be when they first go after money? How does it fit in the development of a new business?
And I know that answer today is a little more controversial than it was for decades when it was develop a plan and go out and do that, because there's so many ideas that are going on a lean theory, right, or going on a minimum viable product. But even then, if one has a minimum viable product, it means that one's thought through what's the product, how much does it need to be in place to be viable, and what's that minimum amount in terms of costs and sales and such like that. So that is a plan for business. So I really think that without a plan, you're just guessing. I don't even think it's a hobby. And that's typically the thing, without a plan, it's a hobby. But I think as one goes into it, that you attended a class last year with a venture capitalist who said, in terms of when when you need to get to know the venture capitalists is,
Good 6-12 months before you want cash.
before you want cash, right? I think the same principle applies to the business plan, that it can be started. And again, we're talking about written business plans, but again, we can also talk about it as plans for business. Just what is the plan for business? And it can be segmented. It can just be the marketing plan and identifying who this is for. It can be just the revenue model in terms of is it subscription based, it's recurring revenue or whatever it is. Those pieces can be fleshed out and done as one goes. But even if we started with a blank business plan that just had the headings, executive summary, and the things that are in the plan you guys are working on in this course, and you fill in as you go into those headings. So I don't think it's too soon ever. And I think that even those people who are out there selling and preaching the one-page business plan and selling and preaching the business plan is dead and that kind of a thing, one still has a plan for business. And if one has ever met for funding, ever met with a venture capitalist, ever met with an angel investor or something like that, they say, I don't want to see your business plan, but they'll take a 2-hour interview. They ask every question the business plan would have.
I don't want to read it, I want you to tell it to
Exactly.
How much does the business owner or the partners need to be involved in creating a business plan? And the follow-up, what can they delegate realistically?
Boy, that is a great question, and in fact, it reminds me that when you ask a question about the single biggest problem, with business plans, this would be right next to not a description of how we're going to use our funding or our revenue, and that would be a business plan that is delegated entirely to another person. So there are law firms, there are writers, or business plan firms that write business plans. If I do not have the input of the business owner, the entrepreneur, the visionary, then it's my business plan as the writer, and it's not their business plan. And so I think that even if you're an entrepreneur and you find a very competent subject matter expert, somebody who's written thousands of business plans, and they'll say, in exchange for this amount of money, I will write you a business plan. Tell me the title of your business and what you want to do. And that person runs and writes a business plan. It's not an effective business plan because it's that person's plan. It absolutely is a collaborative effort. So I think you have to look again for 3 C's in this area. You have to look for competency, you have to look for collaboration, and completeness. Finding somebody who's going to take you all the way through. Those things that you might be able to delegate in the business plan, are the wordsmith, if you're not a wordsmith, are a graphic designer, if it's one that's going to be shared with the public, and the colors and that kind of a thing. One can have research performed. For example, a lot of people recognize or don't, I don't know the particular business plans you're doing with, but once we get outside of just you and I and sharing it, over dinner with our best friend, we need NICS or NICS codes, for example, right? And those NICS codes, for example, there's a company called IBIS World. So you go to ibisworld.com and you can look up and see these incredible research and industry reports that are done on hundreds of industries across the board. What is the projected revenue? What has happened in the economic cycles and things? So I think you can delegate or find research that has been done professionally, but it can't be a substitute for your ideas and your visions. You have to collaborate in that process. And if you find a business plan writer or a mentor or something that's not collaborative, it won't be your business plan.
And as impressive as Jay Taylor's 432nd business may be, the business owner is not going to be able to really buy into that or use that if it's just you writing it.
It's true. I mean, as impressive as that subject matter might be, right, or that expertise or somebody's depth, it's not. And then will the business owner follow it? Because that's like, being on a team and being given a playbook and say, memorize the playbook and then exercise these plays. Well, what if that isn't what the business owner has in mind, or then it's completely delegating the effectiveness and the competency and whether or not it's going to work. I think one of the things that the business model canvas and that the lean startup movement and other things have taught us is to have a business plan that is an operational plan in the inception of a business. It's more of rather than a long-term detailed roadmap, it's more of an immediate, how do I get to the local 7-Eleven, kind of a roadmap. And I think those are very effective to be able to look and require then the business owner to be active and involved.
All right. So business owner, active, involved, and I think that ties into the next thought. how can a business plan be the most help to a business owner after they've written this? Too often, and I'm sure none of yours ever had this happen,
No.
but too often I got my business plan, I gave it to the bank, and then I filed my copy in the bottom drawer of the desk. How can a business owner make it actually useful rather than have that be the fate of this great planning exercise?
Well, again, I think that's a great question, and I think as we're talking to entrepreneurs and others who want to be successful and have viable, sustainable businesses and satisfying businesses, that sometimes we develop a master business plan that kind of sets forth our vision, our dreams, our goals, our revenue model, who our initial target markets are, who our initial leadership team is, our management, and that kind of a thing. But then we can take that first concrete foundational business plan and create an internal or an operational business plan. And I think that's where the key is. So most people just spend the time or the money to develop the minimum viable plan necessary to get the funding, to get somebody on board, or to go to whatever it would look like. Those businesses that are more successful develop an operational plan or an internal business plan that sets forth the benchmarks, the milestones, and that allows for or sets forth what are we going to monitor and what are we going to measure. Because without monitoring and measuring, or sets forth what the KPIs really are in the particular business. That said, the transliteration of that internal or operational business plan are what we call policies and procedures. So although this is about business plans, if we're looking down the road for effective businesses, it are those businesses that once they're started in the road down to business, they take their business plan and they create an operations manual. Policies and procedures. How do we handle? What do we do? What's our social media policy for employees and such like that? Ownership of intellectual property.
It sounds like that really grows out of the same planning process that leads you to the written plan. You just how you're using it.
Right. Because the written plan initially is more of kind of a vision. This is what it looks like. This is what we want to do. That internal or operational business plan, or the operational policies, is more about this is how we do it. So I kind of think, instead of looking so much in the future, we're now looking at the present in that operational plan.
All right. Thank you. I think that answers some of the big questions, and we'll get this shared so the students can learn from your experience.
Glad to do it. Thank you.